They're trying very hard to get away with this one. I don't know if the people are going to forget.
People are never going to forget. The problem is,
on.
do we have any power? What do we do? What do you do? You definitely can change the way you vote, like if it comes up again. But the problem is, this is a bipartisan issue.
It's a bipartisan. It's not.
Yeah.
I don't know. I heard as a Democratic hoax. That's
Yeah, I don't think that's true.
But
Well, it's certainly not a hoax if you go to jail. Certainly not a hoax if Ghislaine Maxwell's in jail too. So like she's in jail for sex trafficking. Excuse me, she's in jail for sex trafficking. But the question is to who? Who's she in? Who? You have to be sex trafficking to somebody in order to go to jail, right?
Yeah.
So who? How's that work? She's been in jail for years. So like, how's that work?
Is she looking at a pardon? Are they gonna?
I don't know, but they just moved her to another prison.
They moved.
It's supposed to be a nice prison, as far as prisons
They
go.
move her to kill her.
Could
I
be.
mean,
But why would you waste the money to move someone if you wanted to kill them? I'm sure they could kill her pretty easy.
I don't.
So that was MAGA adjacent podcaster Joe Rogan. I say MAGA adjacent because he was a darling of the MAGA movement. He supported Donald Trump. He voted for Donald Trump. He endorsed Donald Trump. He's been grading Trump on a curve. And yet over the past several months, the guy who's probably the world's biggest podcaster has been slowly turning on Trump, not just with respect to his draconian immigration policy, but in particular about the Epstein scandal, about the Epstein debacle. So Donald Trump, of course, has been referring to this recently as a Democratic hoax, which doesn't make much sense at all, and the internal logic isn't particularly consistent. It's been debunked time and time again. Even Rogan thinks it's absurd that the convictions against Ghislaine Maxwell in particular, she was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison for sex trafficking as an accomplice to Epstein, they're obviously well-founded. What's interesting is Rogan and his guest, who looked like he popped an edible and it kicked in. That was, I think his name is Jesse Wells, a musician. Even they broached the topic of Trump handling this so badly that Trump is thinking about pardoning Maxwell. And we know Trump is at least considering it because he hasn't ruled it out when asked about it. He could have said, oh, no, of course not. Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted to 20 years in federal prison for sex trafficking. In addition to all the other allegations against her, of course, I would never pardon such a terrible person. Instead, Trump uses the same sort of language that he uses to describe all of his other very controversial pardons, like Roger Stone and Paul Manafort, who were prosecuted under the Mueller investigations, the so-called Russiagate hoax, which was not a hoax. They were successfully prosecuted and convicted. Trump said, yeah, I haven't talked about it. I haven't talked about it, but I have the right to pardon people. And then he ultimately pardoned them before leaving office. He said similar things about the January 6th insurrection, so I have the right to pardon them before warming to the idea and ultimately pardoning 1,500 violent January insurrections. Now he's using similar language to hedge about pardoning Ghislaine Maxwell, somebody who used to be a friend of his. So the whole thing looks like a total disaster. And Rogan here, although I wish he would do it much more strongly, is obviously disillusioned with Trump. He's dismayed. He said that, the only thing you could probably do is just vote the opposite way in the next election. So is that Rogan indicating that he might turn on MAGA or the Republican Party in the next election in 2026? The midterms, would he vote for a Democrat? In the 2028 presidential election, would he vote for somebody other than J.D. Vance or Tucker Carlson, whoever the Republican Trump successor will be, assuming Trump leaves office? All I know is that we are seeing more and more distance, slowly but surely, between Trump and Rogan. And that is objectively good, given Rogan's influence, given his reach, given that Rogan, among others, like the Andrew Schultz podcast Flagrant, Tim Dillon, another MAGA comedian, I would argue he's much more hardcore MAGA than Rogan ever was. We'll probably do a separate video about him. He's up in arms about some recent Trump developments. Getting these people away from Trump so that they don't launder and sanitize Trump's message makes Trump's movement much more electorally vulnerable in the 2026 midterms and the 2028 election. I understand, again, I get comments about this all the time. Oh, Rogan's a fucking idiot. Rogan should have known better. And I agree, Rogan is not the smartest guy. Rogan probably should have known better. He's very skeptical about all things Democrat. but is much too generous with the benefit of the doubt with respect to Donald Trump. It's like, dude, at least be even-handed in your skepticism. I get all that. But the fact of the matter is pragmatism has to come first. We can't afford, as a pro-democracy movement, to totally ignore and to turn away the Joe Rogans of the world. If they're turning away from Trump, we need to invite them back in, while also hopefully having dialogue with Rogan. Be like, hey, man, I know you're surprised by Trump doing X, Y, and Z, but he was kind of signaling it all along. Now, on the topic of Trump and Epstein, some pretty brutal polling coming out recently, which again reaffirms that not only did the American people find Trump's management of the Epstein debacle terrible, but a majority of Americans believe that Trump actually knew about Epstein's crimes well before Epstein was prosecuted. So let's take a look. Donald Trump approval, Ghislaine Maxwell, gerrymandering, inflation, and unemployment, August 9th through 11th, 2025. Jobs approval. We'll look at this. We're going to focus on the Epstein stuff, but since we're here in this Trump poll, let's take a look. 42% of Americans strongly or somewhat approve of how Donald Trump is handling his job as president, and 54% disapprove. That's a net approval, the percent who approve minus the percent of disapprove, of minus 12. Pretty bad. Let's see where we are. Current week. That's a good point. Yeah, so right here's the current week of the poll. I don't know if you can see it right here. I'm going to highlight it. The blue line is Biden. Look at Biden's net approval rating at this point in the timeline compared to Trump's. Yikes. Again, as unpopular as President Biden was when he left office, he's objectively more popular than Trump at this point in the timeline. Trump's support among Republicans, while still very, very high, has slowly trended downward since the start of his second term. The slow decline in Trump's approval rating among Republicans and Republican-leaning independents has been partially offset recently by a small increase in his approval among the 20% of Americans who lean towards neither party. Let's keep going here. Fewer Americans view Trump as honest and trustworthy than they did at the start of his second term. Again, it's bewildering given that he is the most prolifically and pathologically dishonest politician in modern American history at least, but it's good to see at least some recognition like, oh, Jesus, he is full of shit. He is a liar. Yeah, so right now, 53% say that he's not trustworthy and honest, compared to only 31%, which I would still say is too high for those who view him as honest, but I digress. Net approval of Trump's handling of the Epstein investigation? Oof. Net approval of Trump's handling of the Epstein investigation has changed little in recent weeks and is currently at minus 39, minus 82 among Democrats, and plus 14 among Republicans. So Republicans are still inclined to give him the benefit of the doubt, but the fact that it's still plus 14 for the Republicans and not higher, not good. Majority of Americans think Trump knew some, 27%, or a lot, 44%, about the sex crimes committed by Epstein against underage girls before investigations into Epstein began. Only 8% say he knew nothing about them. And that's damning, folks. Most Americans think Donald Trump knew some or a lot about Epstein's sex crimes before investigations began. Ouch. Again, that is a decisive, damn near super majority. No, actually, that's past that. We are past super majority status. For some reason, I thought it was 67%. I thought it was 20. I forgot the numbers there, but no, it is a decisive 72%. Not good for Trump. Should Ghislaine Maxwell have been moved to a minimum security prison, as Joe Rogan mentions? No. Nope. Absolutely not. Far more Americans say that she should not have been moved, 47% versus 14%. Many, 38%, are unsure, but again, a plurality say absolutely not. So, folks, this is not good for Donald Trump. It's really not good. The Epstein situation is a bit quieter of late because there have been no recent developments, but at the time of this recording, the Justice Department is slowly indicating that it will comply with the House Republican House Oversight Committee's subpoena to turn over some Epstein files. They've been slow walking it, but they've recently signaled that they're going to do it. So once these files get into the possession of Democrats and Republicans on the House Oversight Committee, we may learn more, and that might jumpstart the scandal once again. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.